Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Alpha Staff webinar series. Today, we'll be discussing workers' compensation best practices to ensure a safe work environment with Alpha Staff's Safety and Loss Control Manager, Daniel Pietropalo. Before we begin, I'd like to provide a brief technical overview. As you may have noticed, all attendee phone lines are muted and will remain so throughout the presentation. If you have questions, please enter them via the chat feature or the Q&A feature as you think of them, or you can wait to add them at the end of the presentation when we open it up for questions. Also, just a reminder, all the recordings of our webinars are posted to the Alpha Staff website under the Client Resources link. It's a great resource in the event you missed one of our past webinars, or if you want to share the information you learned with other colleagues. Attendance in today's live webinar is approved for one CE credit with both HRCI and SHRM. At the end of the presentation, I will share the contact information needed to request the credit codes. And now I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Alpha Staff's Safety and Loss Control Manager, Daniel Pietropalo. Daniel has 25 years experience in risk and occupational safety and health. He's a certified OSHA outreach instructor, a certified forklift trainer, an industrial hygienist, and he was an OSHA compliance officer for the state of New Jersey for 10 years. He currently manages safety and loss control services and mitigates risk and provides EH&S training. Sorry about that. Daniel, we are so excited to share your expertise with you today. And now I turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's have some fun. So the agenda today, I thought I could bring the best value within this allotted time. I do appreciate the opportunity to present. We're going to discuss some of my previous experience with OSHA, some insight I'd like to share with you, deep dark secrets perhaps that not always gets out to the general public. So we'll give you a little bit of intricacies about OSHA, what our capabilities are here within Alpha Staff. We've really brought our service and our value to another level over the last few years. We've kind of focused on the needs of our clients. And through that, we offer on-site loss control visits and hazard identification. So I'll give you a little bit of insight as to how that works and the functionalities of such. Of course, this time of year, many of you are scrambling with the OSHA 300 posting requirement or reporting requirement. So I'd like to discuss a little bit some of the requirements for the OSHA record keeping standard. And then we'll discuss a little bit of how to reduce risk in the office setting. There's been a huge push on ergonomic evaluations over the last decade. So I'll share with you some little tips on how to get out in front of any exposure in the office place. And we'll talk about identifying loss trends and frequency, workers' compensation claims. Basically, you help me. We manage your claims, but I want to discuss a little bit about accident investigation, root cause analysis to help you and your team, your organization, provide Alpha Staff with a thorough report when it's post-loss, post-incident. And there's value that goes both ways on that. So we'll open up by discussing OSHA and some little bit of compliance tips that I have. So typically within Alpha Staff, my role is I wear many hats. But as the claims come in, as there's a loss, we have an analyst that processes that. They receive the claims. Eric and Diana, you may or may not know them by name. But the ladies will then process that and then it'll come across my desk. And I'll do a deep dive. I'll look for any frequency, any trends that I identify within an organization. And then I'll look at the loss runs. If I see that something stands out or maybe there's a big shock loss, I'll do a deep dive and look at what the contributing factors were for that loss or for that frequency of losses. And in doing so, I can work with the client and then establish corrective action or preventative measures to get out in front of any future loss. So in doing that, I analyze specific clients where we might say, running a little bit heavy on incidents, and then I would reach out and offer an on-site loss site control visit. And the way that works is we've established a little protocol. We're scheduling. They're scheduled through the human resource manager, myself, and then the point of contact on your end with the client. So any type of lag time issues, lag time is the time it takes from the inception of an incident to the time it's received and reported. The benchmark for lag time, we like to see a client report any loss within 5 days. Anything beyond that can affect the outcome of the claim and the financial impact that it may have. So we like all of our claims to come in within that 5-day window. If there's excessive lag time, sometimes I'll reach out and we'll kind of see what's going on and offer support to get that back in check, right? So lag time, monthly loss runs, and any trends in frequency or severity will drive the reason for a loss control visit or the offer of such. This is obviously not obligatory. It's a value, it's a service added. So it's always mutual. We may identify something and say, hey, listen, I'd really like to get out there and identify what's going on, and these are the reasons. But there's never a forced visit. Obviously, we are not a compliance or regulatory agency. We are not OSHA, but we would do the same thing as OSHA and work with you to abate any particular hazards, okay? So that's how the scheduling will work. And then the on-site visit. Once we agree upon a date, time, and location, we'll come on site, maybe myself or an assigned consultant. And then once I arrive on site, we'll meet with the points of contact. We'll have an opening conference, and then we'll discuss the purpose of the meeting. The purpose of the visit may be driven by the factors I just previously discussed in the last slide. We'll review your loss runs and go over about 3 years of history, identifying any frequency or any trends. Maybe it's slips and falls, or it could be musculoskeletal issues, lifting tasks. We'll try to pinpoint where the best value would be while I'm on site. We'll look at we'll talk to the clients again about lag time. We'll look at your lag frequency and the time that it takes to report those losses. And then we can review training records on site or safety programs. Typically, OSHA would do that. That's the first thing they would ask. They would ask for your 300 log history past 5 years, and then they would ask to see training records. So I kind of like to mirror that and assure that I'm checking, we're covering all the bases. So we look at any deficiencies you might have in training records, and we can offer, help closing that gap. We have an internal system called the Risk Management Center. So I may make recommendations according to your industry or the type of exposure you have, and we can get you set up for future trainings if necessary. Then we go out and we look at this is where the real bread and butter is here. This is the facility walk down. So we'll tour the facility. I'll let you guide it. And then we'll look at any unsafe working conditions. But we really particularly look on your operation and the human behavior of the employees. We want to understand the culture. A lot of times it may not be a guard missing from a machine, something so up in your face out in front that's identifiable. There may be some underlying root causes and in the form of human behavior, maybe some unsafe acts. So again, we're just an extension of your team, and we're there to help. And anything we identify is confidential between our Alpha staff and the organization. But we like to identify all aspects of potential exposure. So we'll look at human behavior, we'll look at repetitive motion, lifting techniques, the safety culture, as I mentioned, machine guarding if applicable, any type of electrical hazards or fire hazards. We'll look at your emergency evacuation plan and trip hazards. Some facilities utilize ATVs or golf carts. Look at your forklift operations, fall protection. We run the whole gamut. So any type of OSHA regulatory requirement that's applicable to your industry, I'll make sure that we're addressing those while on site. After we do the walkthrough, during the walkthrough, I should say, with permission of the client, the organization will take pictures because eventually we're going to report it to you, and we want to be able to identify where opportunities of improvement are. So if permissible, we'll take pictures, obviously the full candid with respect to your operation, and any industry secrets, trade secrets will not be obviously disclosed. However, we'll identify just the hazards. So once we do that, we'll come back and we'll have a closing conference. During a closing conference, we'll address any imminent dangerous situations. By imminent danger, we say immediately dangerous to life or health at that moment. So if we feel like, God forbid, we're looking at a potential fatality or a serious injury, we'll address those on site at the time and ask you, we probably might even stop the visit. This has never happened, thank God. But if it does, we'll address that immediately to abate that hazard. Outside of that, the big nasties will come look at the level of exposure you might have. So we'll categorize serious injuries, serious potential hazards to low level other than serious potential hazards. And we'll discuss those. I'll tell you how the OSHA standards are applicable. And then we'll share that with you prior to leaving the site. Now, when I get back, we'll take all that, the culmination of all our efforts and the time spent, we'll generate a report. We utilize a program called Safety Reports, which is real nice. And the photos can go right in. It'll tell you exactly where it was taken, the location. It'll identify the type of hazard. It'll cite the actual OSHA standard. So if it's forklift, it'll say 1910.176, OSHA CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, standard. It'll read the standard. So there's no surprises. You know why myself or another consultant is identifying that as potentially a violation, not a violation, but an opportunity, let's say. And we'll address the actual standard. So, a little bit of connecting the dots for you. Once we do that, we'll recommend corrective action in the report. So I'll say, okay, this is the way to abate this hazard. Here's my recommendation for you, whether it be training or physical abatement, putting a guard back on the machine, things of that nature. So that I'll be right under the OSHA standard in the report. And then any training material that we may provide as support. We'll set a date. Typically, we'll say 30, 60, 90 days. We'll circle back, give you time to, put some corrective action in place. And again, this is not a regulatory compliance visit. It's Alpha staff, your partner. So we work with you. Again, there's no penalties or any type of negative repercussions. This is strictly consultative. But we like to give 30, 60, 90 days, depending upon the severity of the hazard, and just offer support in trying to close that gap. Okay, so big nasties this year right now from February 1st up till April 30th of every year. OSHA requires the posting of the OSHA 300 log, and then if you're required to submit, there's a submittal date that I'll discuss later on. But a lot of clients struggle with this. It is something that, I'd like you to take a little bit of knowledge away from. I wanted to spend time on this because we have questions that we're fielding all day, every day, especially the first 3 months of the year. So my goal is to educate you on the record keeping regulations. We're going to talk about why it's regulated by OSHA. We'll talk about preparing, maintaining, and submitting those logs. And then also we'll talk about the employers, the workers, and OSHA personnel, how record keeping relates to all three. Okay, so the objective, as I mentioned before, we're going to recognize the benefits of documenting injuries and illnesses. A lot of time it's a big push in the beginning of the year, January. Organizations will realize that the reporting or posting requirements coming up, and then it's a scramble. What happened, in the last year, the previous year? Let's try to get all our injuries. Let's get them logged. That is not the ideal way to do it. OSHA actually requires any recordable injury or incident to be logged within 7 days. So it should be a living, breathing document ongoing throughout the year. So December 31st, the door should be closed, and you shouldn't have any work to do when the new year posting requirement comes. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. So it is a mad dash. So we'll talk about the benefits of documenting injuries. We'll determine which workplace injuries and incidents need to be recorded. Some clients under-record, some clients over-record. So we'll talk about both situations. I'll explain the process of recording workplace injury and data, what qualifies as a workplace injury. And then I'll identify which OSHA form must be made available. As I mentioned before, OSHA compliance officer comes on site. He or she's gonna ask for that OSHA 300 for the last 5 years. And then I'll discuss OSHA severe injury reporting requirements. These are some regulatory penalties that can be hefty if this is not met. So I'll leave you with a little bit of information on that as well. Okay, so some general record keeping requirements. To prepare and maintain records, it's applicable to a company with 11 or more employees. We want to make sure anything from cuts, fractures, sprains, and amputations are being recorded. Acute and chronic illnesses. So acute and chronic illness can be respiratory issues or hearing loss. If there's a actual exposure to noise over 85 decibels, greater than 8 hours, that's an occupational hazard known as occupational illness, and that's hearing loss. So a little bit challenging sometimes to prove. Maybe somebody's in a rock band, or they shoot guns, or they drive big loud motorcycles. There are outside influences that OSHA will take into account. However, if it's found compensable, if it's found that it was related to the workplace, then occupational disease would be recordable. Okay, so some exemptions. If you have 10 or fewer employees, you would not be required to post this or submit it unless you receive the request specifically from OSHA in writing. What does that mean? There are certain high hazard industries that OSHA would target. So even if you do not meet the number of employees, 11 or more, you may receive a letter from the Bureau of Labor Statistics or from OSHA requesting you to do so and meet this requirement. And then low hazard industries are typically exempt. Okay, so recording criteria must be work related. It must be a new case. The condition must be qualifying, meaning that it happened at work. And if it impacts a pre-existing injury, that also could fall within this realm, and it must be caused by the workplace. Okay, records of work-related injuries and illnesses. Excuse me, we record all work-related injuries and illnesses on the form. Any employee that's on the payroll, temporary employees if they're supervised day to day by your organization, and sole proprietors and partnerships are not included. Okay, a new case. What is a new case? It means it was not previously experienced or recorded. However, if a previous injury had full recovery prior to the incident and that was exacerbated by a work-related task, then it would get re-recorded as a new case. And the exposure caused an old injury to reappear, same. It would have to be recorded as a new case once again. Okay, so why do we do this? We document workplace injuries because it could prevent fatalities. It improves access by employers and researchers. Okay, it provides public access to workplace safety information, and it's a statistical measurement for OSHA. So OSHA, Bureau of Labor Statistics, sometimes will audit certain industries. For example, construction, fall protection is a big hazard, potential exposure. So they might target any type of roofers or any type of iron workers, and they'll ask for this statistics from the year to be submitted so they can get an idea of kind of where the injuries, fatalities, and the losses are occurring in that type of industry. Okay, so there's 9 exceptions as to what should be recorded. Okay, understanding this will save you time and unnecessary work. I'd rather you over-record than to under-record. If you leave off a recordable injury and there's a discovery of that by OSHA, it could have a regulatory penalty associated with that. So I prefer the over-recording as opposed to under-recording. But we don't want to just put everything that we think is recordable on the log without a rhyme or a reason. So we want to determine what is recordable and what is not. Okay, so general public, if a person is not working or is on their day off, obviously that's not recordable. And if an employee is at the grocery store shopping, he or she went out at lunchtime and is injured, technically they may or may not be on the clock, they may have punched out, but that is not recordable. Now I want to be clear, my disclaimer to these 9 situations we're going to discuss, I am not speaking regarding workers' compensation. This is not compensability. I'm not speaking about a claim, I'm speaking about OSHA 300. Just want to be clear so that I don't lead you down the wrong path. This is not what's compensable or not, this is OSHA 300 reportability. Okay, so a non-work event, if there's an underlying condition and it's not exacerbated by a task, if a person's not doing heavy lifting, overexertion, things of that nature, and they have a seizure, God forbid, fall down, the symptom may surface at work, the person might have an underlying cause that would not be recordable under OSHA 300. The third situation is voluntary participation. For example, after work wellness programs, if you're in a fitness club, you're doing recreational activity, that would not go into OSHA 300 if the person was injured. Eating prepared food. So if it's brought in by an employee, if we're doing a potluck and somebody gets sick, food poisoning, that would not be on the 300 log. They have an allergic reaction. A slip and fall in the lunchroom, not part of their job task. The exception would be food poisoning from a meal provided by the employer for a work event, then that could go on to OSHA 300. A lot of little deviations here, and sometimes the lines are blurred, which is why this could be very challenging and confusing. So I'm doing my best to try to give you clarification. Okay, personal task. If it's unrelated to the job, if somebody's sitting in the cubicle and they want to crochet or knit and they stab their finger or get a cut as a result of doing a task that is not work related, it would not go into OSHA 300. If it occurs outside the work hours, wouldn't be recordable on OSHA 300. Okay, personal grooming, somebody for whatever reason is grooming themselves on the job, it gets cut or injured, that's not work related. Self-medication or intentionally self-inflicted. I did have a client one time, there was a video of it. It was fortunate for the client that their employee, um, it was very obvious, it was blatant, jumped in front of a forklift and his foot got ran over. He kicked the forklift before the injury, so it was kind of very reactive. It's fortunate the surveillance was there, and the question was compensability and recordability. It was not recordable because it was obviously intentionally self-inflicted. Okay, company parking lot, little fender bender, you're on an access road or in your commute to work. This is challenging again, talking about compensability versus OSHA recordability. You know, if it's part of the employee's job to commute and travel from site to site, and there's an accident or any type of situation like that where there was an injury, you know, compensability is different. However, that would not be recordable on the OSHA 300. Okay, common cold or flu. There was a big question about COVID. We have some facilities, for example, in the hospital, the nursing industry, where it was kind of running rampant with COVID at one point back during the outbreak. OSHA has a different perspective on that, but again, if it can be traced and related to the job task, OSHA had a little bit of a challenge with that during that period of the pandemic. However, common cold or flu or any type of mental illness is not an OSHA reportable on 300 log. All right, so there's 3 OSHA injury recording forms. There's the 300 log, which is to be maintained and filed away for 5 years. There's a 301, which is the incident report, which basically is an accident investigation. This is quite overlooked. Quite often, many people do not meet this requirement and then find themselves in a jam if OSHA ever comes out on site. And then there's a 300A. This is what is posting. This is what gets posted every year. The 300A keeps the employee's name anonymous. This is just the summary. So it does not specifically go into details, the employee's name or anything like that, which is why this is what is posted. The OSHA 300 log is not posted. It is maintained, filed. Again, the 300A, just the summary, is what needs to be posted. Okay, 4 recordable illness categories. So death, fatality. You're going to record any type of days away from work. You're going to record job, transfer, or restricted duty. And then there's other. The other could be illnesses, like I mentioned before, hearing loss or respiratory conditions. Okay, so if there's a fatality or death, first of all, OSHA needs to be reported within 8 hours of that incident. This is something that OSHA does not flex or bend. If there is, God forbid, a fatality in the workplace, the obligation is to meet the requirement. It needs to be called into your local OSHA area office within 8 hours of such. Then we can worry about filling out the OSHA 300 form, but I want to make sure that you understand and make that call first. The log is then secondary. So if there was a loss, we would fill it out, and there's right where that red arrow is, it reads death. So it indicate whether it's an injury or illness, and then we would put the details as to how that happened. Okay. The OSHA 300 log has different categories. It discusses injuries, illnesses, recordable employee injury and illnesses. We got to enter it within 7 days of the incident happening. And then the calendar days is how we count it. So the number of days the employee is unable to work, including holidays, weekends, vacations, and other days off. We do not count the day of the injury, and the cutoff point maximum is 180 days. Okay, so even if it was a partial day, we would still count that, but not the day of the incident. So we would put it over here in column K, right where that red arrow is. We'd fill out the number of days that that employee was either restricted or away from work. Okay, this is the 300A. This is what we post. This is a summary. of work-related injuries and illnesses. It includes all reportable injuries and illnesses, and it's for the calendar year. So if you see the circles there, G, H, I, J, K, and L, that's what we're going to put the number of days, the number of cases you had at the location, and then the total number of injuries, skin disorders, poisonings, hearing loss, whatever it might be. We want to post it in a highly visible location, typically the lunchroom, break room. February 1st of each year, we're going to post for the previous year. We're going to keep it posted through April 30th. And OSHA, recommends doing periodic checks. Sometimes, horseplay is involved, and the log may be defaced. If a compliance officer came in and saw that, just showing that you're not maintaining and keeping it up. So always good to do a little spot check once in a while once it's posted. Okay, this is the 301. This is what slips through the cracks quite often. This is the injury and illness incident report. So for every logged incident or injury or fatality that goes on the OSHA 300, needs to have a correlating 301 form that describes the injury to illness. We're going to record additional details from the log on here. Again, 7-day window to complete. And you can use an equivalent. If you have an internal incident report or accident investigation form, you can supplement this with that. But there needs to be some type of incident report that relates to every loss from that previous year. Okay, so first aid. What is first aid? This is what I talked about over recording. Anything that's non-prescription medication, if somebody is sent to a pharmacy and they get a bottle off the shelf in Walmart, Walgreens, that's not prescription, that would not be recordable. A tetanus shot is not recordable. Cleaning a wound, butterfly stitch, up to a butterfly stitch is not recordable. Hot or cold therapy, removing a splinter, or just putting a finger splint on is not a recordable injury. It's considered first aid. First aid does not get logged on the OSHA 300. What are employee rights? So this addresses the 300A. You want to keep sensitive information secure. For those in industries such as healthcare or anything like that, any time that there's a needle stick, we do not want to record the employee's name on the 300 log. We want to keep that sensitive because of potential exposure to bloodborne pathogens or any type of bloodborne disease. We do not record the name of the employee when it comes to a needle stick. That's sensitive information. And you want to always discuss that exposure in a secure private place. And you do not discuss that case publicly. We don't want to announce that he or she was exposed potentially, to this bloodborne pathogen, especially when it comes to needle sticks. Okay, other recordable medical treatment beyond first aid. If there was a prescription provided, this is why our case managers do such a good job of giving you the doctors or the local medical facilities to send your employees, because they work closely with us. And quite often in the past, not when I was with Alpha staff, but in the previous life, I would see a random local doctor be quick to just write a prescription when they could have avoided the case becoming an OSHA recordable and just given an over-the-counter medication. Okay, other inclusions are fatalities, hospitalizations, amputations, loss of an eye. I want to emphasize once again, fatalities, amputations, or loss of an eye is required to be reported within 8 hours to OSHA. An inpatient hospitalization, if the employee is admitted to the hospital, there's a 24-hour reporting requirement. We're not calling OSHA on every incident. But once again, fatalities, amputations, loss of an eye is an 8-hour reporting requirement. 24 hours for any inpatient hospitalization, not from the time of the accident, but from the time of the admittance to the hospital. If the incident happens at 3 p.m., employee gets sent to the hospital, he or she's admitted 8 o'clock that night, you have 24 hours from 8 o'clock to report that to OSHA, the admittance. Okay, so in doing so, you want to have the establishment name, the location of the incident, the time it occurred, the type of injury, the employees and how many were affected, contact names and phone numbers of those employees, and the description of the event. OSHA is going to ask you that up front. Okay, reporting, storage, and retention, as I mentioned a few times, all records are maintained for 5 years. Employees are mandated to report fatalities and injuries regardless of the size. And we want to review our procedures regularly just to make sure that we're changing with the times. Anytime new regulations come out, we want to stay up to speed with those. Okay, recap when to report. Work-related, I can't stress it enough. Fatalities within 8 hours, inpatient hospitalization, amputation, loss of an eye, 24 hours. That's the neck. There was a typo there, sorry. So you can call the local OSHA area office. There's the hotline, or you can go onto the OSHA website. www.osha.gov, G-O-V, is the OSHA website. If you do not want to speak to the duty officer, the OSHA compliance officer over the phone to report, and you're more comfortable doing it on the website, you may. It's multi-language. It's in English and Spanish, and I believe Creole now. But you can do it online, or you can call it in. Okay, we'll talk about a little bit briefly about workstation ergonomics. As I mentioned, there was a big push over the last decade on ergonomics. So the first thing we'll talk about is the chair. We'll get into the keyboard, mouse, monitor, and then the environment. There was a huge influx of of repetitive motion and musculoskeletal injuries. So OSHA was looking at an ergonomic standard and implementing that. And that's why ergonomic evaluations are a very good idea. It shows due diligence on the end of the employer. So the chair is more important than just a place to sit. Obviously, best practices for selecting the chair. You want to make sure that the chair suits the person and not vice versa, right? You want to fit the chair to the person and their body type and not the person to the chair. We'll look at seat height, seat back, seat depth, the tilt, and the armrest position in this section. Okay, first thing, we want to make sure the feet are always flat on the floor. We all come in different heights, shapes, sizes. And, we don't ever want our feet to be dangling because it causes a lot of stress on the lower back. They have the little steps now. So if the person does not reach the floor, we want to make sure we're providing them something besides telephone book, maybe. But they have the little steps now that you can buy, and it flattens their feet. So that's the best posture, ideal posture. Okay, you want your knees bent at an angle of 90 degrees or greater. Okay, we don't want the feet hooked up underneath the seat, and we don't want them overextended too far either. Thighs horizontal to the floor. Again, knees, it's not ideal to have the knees up towards the chin or hanging too far down. 90 degrees in horizontal is ideal. Seat tilt. We want to make sure that you're on a right angle or slightly greater. So you want to adjust the pan, which is the bottom part where you're sitting on, and you want to make sure your hips are supported to the tops of your thighs. As I said, at a right angle or slightly greater. The lumbar curve, it should match the person's body posture, their structure. So you want to make sure that you're getting proper support on that lumbar curve of the spine. Okay, this is important. On the pan, you want to adjust the seat pan either forward or backwards so that it's within 1 to 4 inches. You never want the chair pan to be pushing up against the back of your knees, the back of your legs. It can cut off blood circulation and cause some issues, and you don't want it to be too far extended either. Okay, second part is keyboard and mouse. This is where we get into repetitive motion, carpal tunnel. So we'll look at your keyboard height, the keyboard to user distance, hand postures, mouse height, and where the mouse should be oriented. Okay, you want the height to be 90 to 105 degrees. So you want to have pretty much a right angle with your forearms, and you want your hands to be flat and not either curved up or curved down. So you want to form straight lines with your hands. So the distance between you and the keyboard should allow you to relax your shoulders. Your elbows should hang close to your body. You don't want to have your shoulders shrugged up too high or your arms hanging too low. Okay, adjust the height, your desk height, the keyboard, or the mouse position so that your wrists are in straight lines. So straight lines would be this posture here. You do not want to bend them to the side or in. That can cause carpal tunnel, especially during repetitive motion. Okay, straight lines again. You do not want to have your fingers bending up towards your keyboard, and you don't want them hanging down too far either. Okay, mouse position, believe it or not, is very important. So if you look here, we want the green section, section A, is the ideal position for a right-handed or left-handed person. We don't want the mouse to be too far out where they're reaching or too far over or too close to them either. So section A is ideal position for the mouse. Okay, your monitor, this is very important. This can cause neck issues, it can cause issues with your eyes. So correct monitor height and positioning protects your shoulders, neck, back, and eyes. All right, so we'll talk about height, the distance, alignment. We'll talk about the screen. Okay, best practice would be you want it within 2 to 3 inches. You don't want it too far where you're straining and you can't quite see the monitor. And you don't want it too close either where it's going to cause issues to your eyes. The monitor should be 16 to 28 inches, okay? You want to adjust for corrective lenses if you do have contacts or glasses. It might have to change it to meet your needs. Primary position, a lot of us use 2 monitors, 3 monitors now, but you ideally want you have your primary monitors directly in front of you, and then you can off to the side have the other 2. Best practices, you want the monitor to be perpendicular to the strongest source of natural light. So you don't want the natural light coming in behind the monitor. You want it off to the side. That'll be ideal for this type of setup. And if it's behind you, it can blur the screen and cause you to strain your eyes. So off to the side, perpendicular is ideal. And then same thing with artificial light. You want to position the monitor so the light is either to the side or just above. You want to avoid shining light directly in your eyes or reflecting from behind off your monitor. Okay, the environment. We'll talk a little bit about the following elements: frequency used items, contact trauma, storage of cabinets, light clearance, and lighting. Okay, frequently used items should be positioned as near as possible to reduce awkward postures. So if you're writing or you're utilizing some type of pad, obviously the green section is ideal. You don't want to have it out in the red or yellow area where you're reaching, constantly stretching. It causes issues. Okay, it's very important here. A lot of times in the past, we used to have these rough edge desks. Now they're a little more rounded. A lot of them come with pads, but you want to avoid the contact with sharp edges. You want to either lower the table if you can, or raise your chair up, but now you can utilize these pads. They sell pads that go on rough edges. I've seen many times. If you do have a desk and it has a sharp corner, you can buy pads. They're called softeners, and they adhere right to the desk, and they'll give you a nice, soft, rounded point of contact because you do not want to incur contact trauma. Okay, your leg width should include the width of your hips plus 2 inches. So you want to make sure you got at least 2 inches on each side of you. You don't want to be in there too tight. The best practice is always to have 2 inches plus on each side. Okay, so the leg room height, you want it greater than or equal to the highest point of your thighs. So you don't want to be jammed up underneath the table. All right, so you want to have the highest point of your thighs, and you want it to be greater than that. And the depth will allow the most comfortable position. So you want to be able to, again, be able to move in and out without your stomach being pushed up to the table. So you want to make sure that your depth is appropriate. Okay, some recommendations. Talk to your supervisor about making changes you need. It's always good to do an evaluation. You can kind of use this PowerPoint as a guideline if you like. Again, we spend 8 hours plus at work many times. That's a third of our life. So if we're sitting for extended periods of time, you want to make sure that you're fitting that workstation to the person's body type and not vice versa. We don't want to adapt to the cubicle or workstation. We want to adapt the workstation or cubicle to the person's body type. All right, we'll conclude today's presentation by discussing briefly accident investigation. As I mentioned earlier, as a claim comes in, we're very organic in the way that we handle it. We're hands-on, we do a deep dive, we identify root causes, contributing factors, but it's very challenging. I'm handicapped behind my laptop screen when a claim comes in if the details are not there. I only have vision into what occurred by what the person reporting that provides in detail. So for example, if Thomas slipped and fell on the floor, quite often I'll receive a claim that says employee slipped, hurt leg. There's nothing there that I can do to help you, and I have no vision, no insight as to the contributing factors of what happened. I cannot perform a root cause analysis. So what I'm going to educate you on now is how to do appropriate accident investigation and report the details. It's always best to ask why, and it's kind of a rabbit hole. The more whys you ask, you can go down further and further, and it'll give you greater details, paint a more clear picture. So for example, Thomas fell on the floor. Well, why did he fall? Was he wearing proper footwear? Was the lighting bad? Why was the lighting bad? Well, the bulbs were out. Oh, why did he fall on the floor? Because the lighting was bad? Because he did not see the puddle. Well, why was the puddle there? Well, now we discovered that there was a leak above the light that caused the light to go out, that caused the puddle, that caused Tom to fall because he didn't have appropriate footwear, slippers, and shoes, right? So the more whys we ask, the more we can go down that rabbit hole and get better, clearer understanding. So I'm going to equip you with the tools of basically how to ask why and do a proper accident investigation. Okay, we're going to discuss an incident. An incident is referred to the accident, right? That's the event that caused the injury or near death. There's some strong data that's an industry standard in my world that we utilize, and we discuss in that near misses, for every 100 near misses, it leads to one accident. So this is, again, the bread and butter. The near miss is really what's going to be of value. We want to ensure that we're treating the near miss as important and giving that priority as an incident. So if we're going to do an accident investigation because we had a loss, well, the near miss can prevent that loss. It kind of tells you where we're going, what direction we're headed. So make sure you're doing your diligence and performing a clear investigation on the near misses. It's the event that almost resulted in the accident, death, or damage, but it's a warning sign of what's to come. The direct cause is the most obvious reason of the incident, but the root cause, again, this is very important. These are the factors that underlie the underlying factors that contribute to the loss. Okay, some guidelines. Very important. We want to include both management and employees in the investigation. We don't want it to be driven just by management. A lot of times the employees are the experts of their craft. So they're going to be able to tell the best story, the best root cause as to what led to the accident because they're the ones performing the work. So we want to make sure that there's a duality there and that we're tag teaming employees with management in doing the investigation. We want to make sure that you have, again, expertise, technical expertise. So if the person injured was material handler and he's transported to the hospital, we want to discuss with another material handler what type of exposure was present at the time, because they are the expert, they are the one that's doing the job. So we want to ensure that we have that technical expertise included in the accident investigation. Very important is that we want to focus on fact finding. We don't want to have any fear factor from the employees where they're worried about repercussions. We don't want to place blame and have the facts hidden or lost because they're afraid to be forthcoming because of potential repercussions. So again, focus on the facts, finding the reasons, and avoid placing blame. We want to collect as much data as possible. Okay, we want to interview personnel, very important during the interview process. We want to ensure that we're separating the employees who we're interviewing. We do not want a collaborative story. A collaboration happens when more people, more than one person get together and they all tell the story and it kind of merges into one. So we want to separate witnesses from those involved and get individual perspectives to get the most clear picture of what caused the incident. And then we want to document the site. When I worked for OSHA, I had the unfortunate task of investigating fatalities. And quite often it's a traumatic situation after an accident or an incident, especially one of that severity. So emotions are running very high and I was not always of the clearest of mind. So photographs, taking pictures, documentation is always your best friend that you can come back and revisit at a later point. And sometimes the root cause would be staring me in the face. I missed it when I was on site, but when I reviewed the pictures, it was right there. So we're all born with cell phones in our hands. And again, with respect to trade secrets or anonymity of the person who was injured, documenting and taking pictures of the scene will preserve it and give you something to look back and revisit after. Okay, so procedure review. First and foremost, we want to ensure that the injured is taken care of. If they require medical treatment, get that taken care of, call 911 and secure the area. We want to assure that we control or eliminate the hazard so there's no potential exposure to anyone conducting the accident investigation, most importantly. So we're going to secure the area, control, eliminate the hazard. We're going to contact the appropriate people, be it management, whoever, what parties need to be, employee representatives, or that expert. Then we're going to start preserving the evidence. We want to make sure that we quarantine the area in a way that no evidence is removed before we begin the accident investigation. Again, photograph the details of the scene. We want to interview witnesses and do that separately. We'll review the videos when available. We reconstruct the incident, and this is my who, what, when, where, why, and how. But again, the whys are really going to get you the best information, the most accurate details as to what led to the incident. Okay, then we want to provide specific details on the incident, the contributing factors. Was it human error? Was it environment? Was it applicable policy? Did the employee deviate from what they were trained to do? Did they deviate from a procedure? Human error is quite often a leading cause. Sometimes we have trouble getting the kids out to school in the morning, and then from school we're driving to work, we get caught in traffic. Now we're late, and our mind is just all over the place. And then you jump into your work task, and it's human error at that point that typically leads somebody to deviate from what they were trained to do. Unsafe conditions are created as a result of human error. So we want to make sure that we're looking at all contributing factors. And then again, the root cause analysis, what led to the incident, and then corrective action is the greatest takeaway. How do we prevent this from reoccurring? The corrective action directly is a result of a proper root cause analysis. And in summary, incidents can occur due to unsafe acts, unsafe conditions, organizational failures. And what we missed here was human error. Human error is another major contributing factor. Okay, investigating even minor incidents, near misses, and unsafe behaviors can lead to prevention of more serious and costly accidents. Please assure that you're doing due diligence and looking into near misses. Always look for and address root causes. And we want to make our investigations person focused. They use the incident as a starting point, but a system focused investigation looks at the entire system. So we want to incorporate the two. And always document and report your incidents and your misses, again, to prevent any future exposure. That concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Wow, thank you, Daniel. I don't know if anyone else out there was constantly correcting as you were going through the ergonomic portion, but I feel like my work area needs some furniture rearrangement. So I know what my task is this weekend. We do have a couple of questions. So one is under reporting requirements, does that include 1099 or contractors?
Yes. So if there is direct supervision, if you were dictating their job tasks, then you would have ownership. If they are not directly supervised by your organization, then no.
Right.
It would
We
be
have another.
it would be direct supervision that would distinguish that.
Okay. We have another question under employee rights. Can you publicly discuss a recorded injury without revealing the employee's name?
Yes, yes. Quite often there's a value in that. Um, I quite often see it done during safety committee meetings, where safety committee meetings will meet on a monthly or quarterly. Excuse me. Safety committee will meet on a monthly or quarterly basis, and I see a lot of value in pulling in the losses from that previous month or previous quarter, and then without revealing or disclosing, the employee's name, we look at the incident, and that's where we do the root cause analysis, and we look at corrective action. So sharing that to me is of great value with respect to, again, the anonymity of the employee.
Great. And then another question is the first few slides that you shared were about the on-site visit,
Yes,
were a lot directed toward the Alpha staff process when a claim is filed, but not all of the clients who are attending our webinar today have Alpha staff for risk or work comp. So I was wondering, if I'm a client that doesn't use Alpha staff, can I use those slides? If I get a copy of the slide deck, can I use those slides as kind of something we can use internally of things to look
sure,
out for?
absolutely. I put that together. I built that when I came on board with Alpha Staff. There's no copyright or anything like that. That's just what my experience has brought me to find, I guess, a middle ground between how an OSHA visit would go, because of my OSHA experience, and then how a consultative visit would go. So I kind of blurred the line a little bit. I wanted to give the regulatory perspective, but also make it friendly where it's, consultative. So that's, yeah, sure. You can feel free to use those guidelines.
Excellent. Well, that does answer all of the questions that we have for today. And I'm going to go through kind of the rest of our closing slides, but we still have additional time. So if you think of any questions, please feel free to use the question and answer part of Zoom to get your questions out there, and we'll get some expertise help for you. In the meantime, wanted to let you know we do have a new email address that's dedicated to our webinar series. It's webinars@alphastaff.com. So to request a copy of today's presentation or to request your HR, CI, or SHRM credits, please send an email to webinars@alphastaff.com. We'll get that information to you as soon as possible. Also wanted to remind you that we do have a survey asking for your feedback that appears as a link once I close the webinar. So if you guys go ahead and close out now that we're ending, you may not receive that link. So we would really appreciate it if you would hold on. I'll close out the webinar. You'll see that link. We do appreciate and read all of the feedback and try to incorporate your requests, questions, answers into our future webinar series. And so one quick final note is to mark your calendar for the next webinar in our series, which is California Anti-Harassment and Discrimination Training. It'll be on Thursday, March 16th. And just a note, this is a 2-hour webinar as mandated by the state of California for the anti-harassment training, 2 hours for managers or supervisors. And that'll be hosted by our own Nicole McDaniel, Alpha Staff HR Account Manager. We'll hang on the line for a couple more minutes just to ensure that we've answered all your questions. We thank you so much, Daniel, for your time today, and we thank you attendees for your time as well. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for attending.